Hi everyone, and thank you very much for joining us as we mark International Women's Day by discussing the position of women at the bar, the progress that's been achieved, as well as what work there is still left to do. So I'm going to quickly introduce us. I'm Kerry. I'm a probationary tenant here at 1 Chancery Lane. I joined after working for 2 years for the Government Legal Department, and I'm here with Laura and Francesca. And would you like to introduce yourselves? Maybe Laura first?
Yes, my name's Laura Johnson. I joined 1 Chancery Lane in its previous form in 2001 as a pupil. I have been at the bar now for 20 years and I was appointed Silk in December 2021.
Congratulations.
I'm Francesca O'Neill, and I was about to describe myself as a junior, but I was called in 2012, so I think I might actually not count. I'm sort of a middle junior. Definitely not senior, and I joined 1 Chancery Lane in 2015, so I've been a member of Chambers for nearly 6 years.
Thank you. So I think it makes sense to start by looking at recruitment first, the start of a career. So the Bar Council's pupillage gateway statistics show that pupils are equally split between men and women now, which is really, really fantastic. However, when you look a little bit closer at the statistics, you see that more women are actually applying, which means that a man applying actually has a slightly better chance of securing a pupillage than a woman that's also applying. So Laura, maybe starting with you, are you surprised that this is the case? Or are you surprised that that's the case?
I'm not surprised by it. I think we still have all sorts of issues about sort of unconscious biases about recruiting in your own image, and we still have a disproportionate number of men higher up the bar. But also one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, because I think it's important, is that whilst we celebrate improvement and we look at these statistics which are much closer to parity than we've had before, I think we also need to look beyond them and question them and see whether they tell the whole story. Because the suspicion I have is if you drill down into those statistics, and I have to confess I haven't done that, but this is just my suspicion, I suspect it's well founded, is that you would probably find that women remain disproportionately represented in the lower paid areas of work and underrepresented in the higher paid areas of work, which I think is one of the really important challenges that we need to look at in the profession as a whole, because that difficulty feeds in then through questions of retention throughout women's careers.
Yep, absolutely. And actually the Bar Council did drill down and do it by practice area, and the area where there was the biggest disparity in success rate between men and women was the commercial bar, I believe from memory, but there was a disparity in the higher paid areas. So your suspicion is very well founded.
And that's right.
And Francesca, have you got any advice for women that are looking to get their foot in the door? You know, what more can they do to try and improve their chances?
Well, I don't think it's really a question of what more they can do, because there are lots of really excellent women candidates out there, and certainly when we look at recruiting pupils, I'm always super impressed by the very high calibre of applicants. It's very difficult for us when we have to do a sift to choose, because there are so many excellent people out there. Just going back to the point that Laura made, it is that unfortunately there still remains a significant disparity in the areas of work that women choose to apply for. So I think I would really urge any really outstanding female candidates to go for the area that you're interested in. Don't be put off by the fact that you might be confronted with what might be termed a kind of male, pale, stale website of faces, because actually 2 points. Firstly, that doesn't often tell the whole story of the people who are tenants at a particular set. There may be lots more going on than appears at first glance. But secondly, things won't change until women take the steps of being bold enough to apply for positions that they might hesitate or not be completely confident with. And there is a real desire, I think, at the bar to make things better and to have more parity. But we're never going to get there if, firstly, excellent applicants don't go for it, and secondly, those of us who are looking at applications aren't prepared to be open-minded and really challenge ourselves to go for candidates who, might not be your kind of obvious choice, taking that very much that what Laura said, that in your own image. sort of concept.
One thing that I wanted to add to that, if you can hear me all right, and do tell me if my internet's failed me completely, which is that, I think as part of that, being bold and pushing yourself forward at all levels, confidence is a really important thing. And one of the things that I would really recommend is engaging with every opportunity that you can find to speak with women in the profession, whether that's attending chambers, virtual open days, or in-person events, and also make sure you sign up for the mentoring schemes, because they're really important. And I think, if you feel you would benefit from it, ask to have a woman to be your mentor. And I think that applies to every stage of your career, because there's increasing numbers of mentoring schemes now for people who are in pupillage and in practice. And I think they're invaluable.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, and just to follow on from points that both of you have made, so Francesca, on the not being put off by looking at a website and maybe not seeing people that you think represent you, I don't think it's any great secret that at Chancery Lane our gender balance isn't great. And when I looked at the website and when I was applying, that is something that struck me, and thankfully it didn't put me off applying. And then actually, now that I've got here, I don't feel like I'm in one of a minority at all. Like, I don't feel like I'm overwhelmed, because it's mostly men, hardly any women at all. So the atmosphere is very, very different to what it looked like at first blush on the website. So that's something that I would really, really reiterate and urge people to do. And Laura, you've mentioned that there's a lot of initiatives at the inns and things like that. And I think I saw recently, and now I don't have the name of it to hand, but I think all 4 inns of court have joined together to put some kind of new forum for women at the bar as well. So I think there are new initiatives springing up all the time, and it's really, really important that prospective applicants.
Can I pick up on that, Kerry? Because there used to be something called the Temple Women's Forum, which had events for women, and that's now reconstituted itself, I think, as the Inns of Court Alliance for Women.
I think that's the other thing,
which was launched quite recently, and I went to that launch event, and it was a really nice event. And what really impressed me was that one of the co-conveners was Dame Nicola Davies, who's a Lady Justice of Appeal, a very impressive lady judge, and she gave a really hard-hitting speech. I was expecting a kind of soft, isn't this lovely, aren't we all wonderful sort of thing, which barristers do like to give speeches like that, but it wasn't. It was very much like, a lot of the women here are senior women. We've been successful and it's been really tough, but we can't allow the status quo to continue. The recent data from the Bar Council was based on a data set extracted from the Bar Mutual Fund. So that's the body that insures barristers. So they have all of the information about what each individual barrister makes in a year, and what areas of practice they're in, and whether they're men or women. So an amazing data set to look at, and the results from that were quite concerning, in that even within particular areas of work, the disparity between what men and women made was quite shocking. And I think anyone who looked at that data was really depressed by it. But instead of skirting around that, this new organisation, the founding speech was, this is unacceptable, this cannot be the status quo, we can't maintain this. We're going to have to look at ways of making sure that women who come to the bar stay at the bar, and they'll stay at the bar if they feel that they earn the same amount of money as men and have the same opportunities for excellent work as men. So there's a long way to go still, but I'm gratified to see that these issues are being taken seriously.
Yeah, and that actually moves us quite well into our next topic, so retention. So statistics released by the Bar Standards Board show that women, when they get to the bar, they are more likely to leave and not return to it than men are. And further, they're also likely to leave it at an earlier age if they are going to leave. So the average age for a woman to leave the bar is 37, whereas for a man it's 48. And so one of the main issues that obviously faces women at the self-employed bar is maternity leave and childcare. And Francesca, I know that you've got children. So how did you deal with this, and what do you think could be done better on maternity leave?
I mean, it's a really difficult issue. I have 2 kids. Laura has 3 kids, by the way. It is, for anyone watching this, it is possible to do this. That doesn't mean it's easy, because of course it's a bit of a balance, it's a bit of a juggle. Chambers was very supportive when I went on maternity leave last year, but equally, and this is not a criticism of Chambers, this would be the same wherever you were. If you're self-employed, you simply don't have the same employment protections that you would if you were an employed barrister or employed in any other business. So I took quite a short maternity leave. I've been very lucky. I have a very supportive husband. I think having a very supportive partner is going to be essential. My husband took 6 months of paternity leave so that I could go back to work quite quickly. I did that out of choice because I really like working, and I'm clearly odd, probably in several respects. But that was a choice that I was able to make comfortably, and I was supported all the way in doing that. It's not a surprise to me at all that women leave the bar when they're 37. That seems completely obvious to me, that that's the age at which women are having first and second children and find the balance impossible. I think we're going to have to do something quite radical, possibly, to prevent that hemorrhage. Certainly it's been upsetting to me to see really brilliant women barristers who I was at bar school with and who have been tenants at other excellent sets, to look around and suddenly wonder where they've all gone. And Laura, I think you've had a similar experience, and maybe you can tell us a bit more about how it feels a bit further up the food chain.
I think it is a difficult problem. I think caring responsibilities are difficult at the bar, full stop, for women and men, whether it's children or whether it's caring for the older generation. And I think those things do fall disproportionately on women. I've got 3 children. They're all primary school age. I was fortunate enough to be in an area of work where I have employed a nanny to support me throughout. I think, as Francesca says, if you have a supportive partner, which I'm fortunate enough to have, great. But I wouldn't want anybody who's doing this on their own to think that it's an impossibility for them. We certainly have a woman in Chambers who wouldn't mind me sharing that, she's divorced and has managed her career at the bar whilst co-parenting her daughter. So everybody has their own challenges, and I think the challenges are greater if you are one of the women who fall into that category of working in the lower income areas of the bar, because your choices of childcare are restricted. And I think that's a huge problem that the profession has to grapple with. And I think, to a degree, one of the things we have to talk about is systemic reform. And it's a big thing to raise, but to me, as I get more and more senior and I see more women becoming judges and High Court judges, the more I think we should talk about it. Because I think one of the real difficulties for all parents is when your job demands you to be available at times of the day when you have caring responsibilities. And one of the things that I think we really need to be thinking about as a profession is it all right for a judge to say to you, well, I want you to have this to me by 9 o'clock tomorrow or 8 o'clock tonight, or whether, if you're being led by a silk, let's have this meeting at 6 o'clock because I've got a busy day today. And I think it's getting easier for people to say, well, I can't do that because I've got to pick my child up from nursery. But certainly when I was a young mother, once upon a time, of my eldest daughter, those were conversations I just wouldn't have felt able to have. And I think only by having people higher up the profession who acknowledge their caring responsibilities does that get easier. And for me, I spent quite a bit of the pandemic working in a long-running case with a legal team where we all had school-age children, and we're all able to acknowledge that there were times in the pandemic where that presented real difficulties. And that's been the first time I've had that experience in 20 years in practice. And for me, that was a real game changer, recognising that a willingness of senior members of the bar to say, actually, I'm not going to ask you to do that for 7:30 tonight because you might have something you need to do or want to do, is something that we should all try and adhere to. And it runs completely contrary to the bar's culture. And of course, there are demands in cases that means that you have to work outside hours from time to time. But I do think we have a real problem of people being in a habit with the availability of, email on your phone, of working all the days, all the time of all the days that there are.
Yeah, and I think that's actually, it's quite acute when you're relatively junior as well, just speaking from that perspective, that, quite often if you're working to a tight timetable, it's been devised by someone who doesn't have caring responsibilities. And although men do have caring responsibilities, especially at the level that I find myself, so approaching 10 years call, quite often the men that I might appear against don't have the same constrictions on their time that I might. And so one can see why it might be more tempting to instruct a man who has more time to work round the clock and is prepared to do that, rather than a woman who might not be able to do that. And then one can see how the opportunities do fall to men more frequently and more often. And I think that's sometimes unconscious bias, and sometimes it's quite conscious bias. And I don't think we can shy away from the fact that that's also a real issue that is going to need to be thought about carefully, and addressed in due course by those of us who really feel passionately that women do add something really brilliant and positive to this profession and can excel and should be able to excel.
Yeah, and speaking of excelling, you mentioned at the start, Laura was one of a record number of female QCs appointed this year. So congratulations, Laura. It was almost parity. So 45% of the QCs that applied were, or that succeeded, were women, and actually 62% of the women that applied were successful. So that really shows the high quality of women that are applying for Silk. So Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about your route to Silk? Did you feel like you faced any obstacles? Have you got any good advice?
It's a strange thing, having suddenly achieved this thing that felt very unreachable throughout my entire career. So I'm not sure I necessarily could describe a route to Silk that had any great planning behind it. Yeah, I took some careers advice in the pandemic about what to do, because I suddenly found myself, like everybody, working at home from a screen on my own, missing hugely what is a wonderful collegiate setup that we have in Chambers, and sort of felt I was lacking direction, and that review led me to making an application that I wasn't expecting to make. And I think that that's an important thing for me to share, because I think one of the biggest barriers that many women have, and I'm always conscious about talking in sort of sweeping generalizations, but I think this is one that it's probably fair to acknowledge is perhaps less confidence. And I think that comes from all sorts of complicated things. And for me, I think it partly came from the fact that I've spent a lot of my career not in Chambers, where I've been hugely professionally happy, but within the profession as a whole, feeling other. And it's a concept that you've probably heard me talk about, Francesca. I do talk about it, that when you work within a system that is not created by people who look and sound like you, the system then doesn't look and sound like you, and it doesn't obviously flex to accommodate your needs. And I think when I started in practice, I had a feeling that I just had to be grateful that I was allowed even to be at the table, not that it was my table. And I'm sure that there are many senior men in our set who would be horrified to hear that, which is why I think you have to share these experiences. And I think that is one of the reasons why we're perhaps seeing higher rates of women taking Silk. It reflects the fact that we're less likely to give it a go. I think one of the interesting statistics is if you make an application and fail, women are much less likely to apply again. And so I think, career support and career development is really important. And I think taking the magic out of Silk and saying to junior barristers, it's okay to say you want this. That's not presumptuous. It's career planning, and that's something we should all be okay with doing, rather than thinking, well, I'm not going to say that because somebody might think I've got a bit big for my boots, is really important to help promote women and help them review their practice, target what they want to achieve, and know when it is the right time to take that step so that you don't miss it. I reached out to other Silks. I found huge support, to my surprise, when I had to go through the horrible process of approaching opponents who were, without exception, delightful, and gave up time to talk to me of their own volition. Silks and Chambers were supportive, and I think the more we can be open about these conversations and provide that structure to say it's okay to have this aspiration. It's also all right as you go through your career to feel like you're not achieving what you want to. That's also normal. And there will be periods when you feel like that at the bar. It's inevitable. And it doesn't mean you're not going to suddenly take a step or turn a corner. But if we don't have these conversations, I think women are disproportionately inhibited. And that's all about getting more people at a senior level to make women feel more that they belong, that they can see people with a voice like theirs ahead of them. In my second six, I only saw one woman in a multi-track trial. So I went into advocacy not knowing really what my voice would or should sound like. And then having taken silk, I needed to work out what I had to buy as my new kit. And I realised I hadn't seen a woman's silk robed in court since 2013, and I didn't know what I was going to have to buy to wear. You know, and that's what we need to change, so that you, Kerry, coming up, and Francesca, you know, approaching the middle of your career, don't have that feeling of otherness that I've had. And you know that it's okay to say, well, actually, I want to achieve that too. And I'd like to be able to be open about that and have a plan about how I'm going to get there. I may not get there, but by having a plan, I give myself the best opportunity to achieve what I want.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, it's kind of disgustingly trite, isn't it? But it is so important for women who are kind of, you know, approaching, like, I was going to say the hard part, not the fact that the entire career path is not hard, but like the part where you really have to start thinking about where you want to go, and the slog and the plan and the stepping stones and the career development thoughts and the, you know, where do you see yourself, and really having those internal and external conversations. It's so important and inspirational to see women, you know, who are successful, who go for it and are, you know, achieving really important milestones, and then having successful practices in silk as well. You know, I think that's something that men see all the time. You know, they take it for granted, and it's really important for women that it is now possible. It's much easier to see that, and it makes it seem like, yes, there's still a long way to go. Yes, it's going to be hard. Yes, I'm going to have to put in the hard work, but it's not a complete fantasy. And not just that, but, you know, just men, I think, at the bar especially, they see those who are ahead of them boast about their success, and boasting about your success seems totally natural, and they learn how to do it. And women don't do that, or they're much more reticent about bragging. So when it comes to filling out applications to tell people how wonderful you are and how you ought to be appointed to these lofty positions, I mean, you know, I have done applications for things, and it has taken me hours, because I have curdled into like a pool of just quaking discomfort at the idea of saying, you know, I have done all of these amazing things and succeeded, and I'm wonderful and I should be appointed. I found it almost impossible to do, and that was just by myself talking to a form. So I think it is just one of those things that we have to get better at, and I definitely have to get better at it, and I might come and ask you for some tips.
I think the other thing that's important is actually that by having these conversations as an organisation and as a profession, you discover actually that whilst it might appear that perhaps the men are more naturally able to do these things than the women, my great discovery actually is I've spoken to lots of silks, predominantly men, because that's predominantly who they are, is that they all feel the same way too. But you only know that by having the conversation. And I think where women perhaps maybe find it more difficult is actually then pushing yourself to go through that insecurity, to give it a go. And there's a very nice phrase that I think Simon Reedhead uses on our website in an area where we have members of chambers talking about their part of the bar, about people reaching down a hand to help pull him up. And it's a phrase that really struck me, because I've had lots of people do that for me, but it's easier when you see people who are offering that as being people who look and sound like you, and actually make you feel that those hands will be successful in pulling you up, rather than, I can't believe you're suggesting to me that I should be taking this step because I don't feel like I'm, you know, the right person to do that. And that's what I think we're seeing more, where I think it's really important that we're seeing more representation of women at these levels, because for the rest of you, hopefully it all gets a bit easier. You know, and the structural difficulties that I talk about, you know, they're still really present. I almost didn't apply for silk when the application came round, because I was homeschooling 3 children and also working on a really big case. And it was only when the advisor I had said to me, oh, well, yes, I've got a number of women who are making that decision. I said to Clark, our senior clerk, that almost broke my heart. And I thought at that point in time, whatever it's going to cost me to get this form, and it's a 4.5 finished, I'm going to do it, because I'm not going to back myself out of this race just because I've got these extra pressures. But those difficulties, you know, again, unless we talk about them, we don't acknowledge that they're there. And yes, women have done really well this year in the silk application, but I suspect that there are a lot of candidates like me who found it incredibly challenging completing against a deadline in a homeschooling lockdown part of the pandemic. And there will have been many women who were considering applying who didn't.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something else that is borne out as well by those statistics of who applied and who got it. Far more men applied, and I think that just really re-emphasizes what both of you were saying about women being less likely to go for it, just because they feel like if they're maybe not in the position to do it, they're not as likely to get it. Whereas I think the over 200 men applied and 50 something got it. So, you know, they're clearly much more willing to sort of throw their hat in the ring. They think that's a fine thing to do. And in terms of filling out applications, really making the most of your achievements, a piece of advice that I got, because I'm the same as you, Francesca, when I'm trying to fill in things and explain why I'm good, like my stomach is turning and you just want to sort of like back into a hole. Imagine that you're doing it for somebody else. You've been given this CV of somebody and you really need to sell them for a position. And that sort of trying to like detach myself from it one step actually really helped me to be like, no, look, objectively, Les, you can say this, that's what's happened. And other people will be doing it. So if you're not willing to make that application like that, then you're really putting yourself out of
I confess that I fill out these forms and then I make someone else read them because I just can't bear, I actually can't bear it.
Actually, you know, the sort of message that one wants to share to people who I hope are watching this is what we really want when we're looking to recruit people is to see you. And one of the things that I felt, you know, has been very powerfully expressed in some of the training sessions that I've been to from the Inns of Court and Bridging the Bar and things, the senior barristers saying to people considering the profession that, you know, if you meet the, you know, requirements that we're telling you that you need to meet in terms of academics and so forth, you're good enough and your life experiences are good enough. And actually from our perspective, it doesn't matter what it is that you're using to describe how you meet the competencies that we need you to demonstrate that you meet in our applications. It doesn't matter whether it's been, you know, as I used to be working as a waitress in the Rainforest Cafe in Manchester, or whether you've been fortunate enough to, you know, travel abroad and do some wonderful volunteering. It's really just about demonstrating those competencies through your own story, and we're much more likely to, you know, be able to see more of whether you can do the job if you're actually willing to tell us about yourself rather than lacking the confidence to do that and telling us what you think we want to hear, yeah. Which I see so commonly when I look at mentors' draft applications. That lack of confidence turns into the person on the page actually not being you. And so if there's one message I can give to anybody, man or woman here watching this, who are thinking about this career or progressing through this career, is try to bite down all those feelings, actually have the confidence to tell me about you, why you're passionate about something, why you're excited about something, what your life experiences are, good, bad, exciting, boring, hard, easy. And then I know whether I want to recruit you.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes for men as well. You know, one of my mentees at the moment from Inner Temple is a man, but someone who comes from a very unconventional background for applying to the bar and really lacks confidence in applying for the sorts of work and the sorts of sets that he's eminently qualified to do because he just doesn't feel like his CV speaks to it. And I really found it much easier than filling out a form on my own behalf to say to him, this is insane, you know, you do have all of these qualifications, you are good enough, this is, you know, this is impressive, you are impressive, you will impress somebody, put it in, make it as, demonstrate the depth of that impressiveness without, you know, without fear. And so I think, yeah, I completely echo Laura's advice, and I'd love to see applications, really bold applications from excellent women. It's what we want to see.
Yeah, that's some really really good advice. So just to finish off, looking back at your careers, if you were starting again now, so from scratch, applying for pupillage, moving through, do you think that there's anything that you would do differently than you did the first time around, or have you got any bits of advice of things that you did that you now with hindsight can see actually made a really big difference and were really, really helpful? Maybe starting with you, Laura.
I've been fortunate, really, looking back on it. To my surprise, I've had a pretty kind career from the bar. I think if I could change anything about myself, which would be a complete impossibility, is I would have recognised that ability in myself, which is something that I have never done throughout my career. I think we, in some ways, it's easy to make things harder for yourself by that self-doubt. And I think trying to find ways, as I say, through mentoring and talking to barristers in practice and getting your applications reviewed, trying to manage those feelings of self-doubt and opting yourself out by not giving things a go because you lack confidence, is one of the things that I would wish to have changed about things. And I just sincerely and profoundly hope that for your generation, Kerry, and Francesca's as well, that the parity that we're seeing at your level is still there when you're at my level, and that would mean that I would finish my career as a sincerely happy and satisfied barrister.
Yeah, I mean, I did not have the easiest start. I did pupillage at a more commercial set and I wasn't taken on. I then did a probationary tenancy at an employment set and didn't really enjoy that work, and sort of leapt at the opportunity to leave that behind and then come to One Chancery Lane. So I have had not such a emphatically straightforward start, and it took a lot. I mean, I was very lucky that I had a lot of support, but it took a lot to sort of roll with those punches and just keep going, because I knew that this was what I wanted to do, and I couldn't really imagine doing anything else, having decided that barristers were fantastically glamorous and amazing people, and I wanted to be one of them.
What a disappointment lay in store for you.
No, not really, because I'm still here and I still feel like it was 100% the right thing to still pick myself up and brush myself off and go for it. And I think I would just say to women who are watching this, you've got to be able to do that, and even when you feel like everything is against you, you just have to keep going and have that kind of determination to get there. And if I could tell myself anything, it would be that I wish that I could kind of say to myself, 7 years ago, 8 years ago, you're going to make it. And I'm pretty lucky and fortunate to have got to the point that I'm at. So I don't think thinking how arrogant that sounded, but like, you're going to make it, and you're going to be a barrister, and you're going to enjoy that career that you've chosen, and keep going.
No, thank you. That's really, really helpful to hear from somebody sort of at the start. And I mean, I myself also had a relatively indirect route into to now being a barrister. I applied quite a few times, and I think interviews, I got too much in my own head, was too nervous, felt like everybody else was better, and I was starting from a sort of a step back. And I think that really came across, and it made it difficult to secure pupillage. And then now that I'm here, I wish that I'd know at the time that I'd just gone for it. Don't hold anything back. If you're in an interview, it's because they think you're good enough already. So just try to, and it's very hard to say, but try to relax and be yourself, and that will really shine through. And it's helpful to hear from people that are a few steps further along the process that those are the same sorts of things that are coming up, and that things have been improving, and hopefully, as you said, Laura, will continue to improve at the rate that they have been, which is actually quite impressive if you sort of look at the statistics over the last 20 years. That things are feeding up through and getting better, and hopefully they will continue to do so. So yeah, thank you very, very much, both of you, for your insights and advice. It's been really, really helpful. I'm sure everybody
Kerry,
watching will agree.
Can I say one thing that I would like to say, actually, just going out of what you just said and what Francesca said, which is this. I think, you know, we talk a lot about the bar as an institution that looks in a certain way. But actually, I think one of the things that the three of us can share, being on the inside of it, is actually your job is a lot less about the wigs and the oil paintings and the panelled corridors. It's about the individuals whose job it is for you to work with. And one of the things that I would really, really like to sort of share at the close of this is we work with people from all sorts of walks of life, and they need all sorts of different barristers with all sorts of different skills to support them through their cases and through some of the most difficult times in their lives. And I'm not just talking about claimants here, I'm talking about also the witnesses that we deal with and defendants. And, you know, I think that's one of the things that the bar's not very good about communicating, is that there is a place here for everybody, because there's a huge range of work and a huge range of people who need us. And I actually, one area where I don't doubt myself is when I'm sitting in a room around a conference table with my team talking about what we're going to do with a case. And I suspect the two of you increasingly find the same thing. And I suppose I'd just like to close with that, with communicating that, you know, there is a place at the bar for everybody, because it reflects the diversity, and it needs to reflect the diversity of life. And it needs to, the message needs to be much more about the nature of the jobs and the skills we need, and less about the oak panelling and the wigs, which is a barrier to people who sometimes don't realise that actually we need them at the head of the conference table too.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I should also say that I have worn my wig twice in nearly 10 years. Great investment.
Brilliant. Well, I don't think that there's anything I could add to that. That's a really lovely way to finish. So thank you both again, and thank you all for joining us. Cheerio.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good luck.